Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book I've reviewed before, some long time ago in fact. This book's a very important book because we are at the cusp at the moment of some very big changes that are going to take place concerning the internet. This book is called Internet Law and Regulation. It's now in its 5th edition, written by Graham Smith. First class book. It comes to us from Sweet Maxwell, Thomson Reuters, and as I say, it's a book which was much thinner when I first saw it, but I'm really delighted to be able to review this new edition because it's an important edition for a lot of reasons, because there are changes afoot as we speak. I'm recording this review in the early part of 2020. We've given the title of the review, and Elizabeth was the lead writer on it, The Internet and What Lies Beneath, an engaging and erudite guide to the legal landscape of cyberspace, now in a new 5th edition, and it comes to us of course from Sweet Maxwell. Now let's have a look at the book first. It was a heavy book. As I say, it's now expanded from what it was. There's the front of the book. There's the spine. There's nothing in it on the back. You can see the spine there. And of course Graham Smith, who's the editor and author, comes from Bird and Bird. Let's go to the back of the book first of all. It's 1600 odd pages. The index at the back is by paragraph numbering, very much the house style of Sweet Maxwell. The index is actually very substantial, and I thought it was extremely helpful. And one of the things you can see again, there's what Sweet Maxwell do is they have a legal taxonomy which explains how the index works, because obviously if you're seeking something, looking for something for research purposes, it's useful to know how the index is compiled. You've then got a technical glossary at the back, which I thought was very helpful for people of my generation. I have to say, one of the problems with the internet is that they use some words that I have no idea what they mean sometimes, and it's very useful because I have an idea of what the meaning might be, but it is useful to have this technical glossary which will assist with some of the terminology, because we all make assumptions about what it means. So these abbreviations and glossaries and so forth are extremely helpful in trying to work out what we need. For instance, I'll give you a classic example. CGI, well, we all think we know about that. It says Common Gateway Interface. It could be computer-generated images, if you think about what happens in the media industry. So you see the difficulties. And it's not a flippant remark, but you get an idea of where I'm coming from with it. There is the front page. You can see that Graham has had a great deal of assistance from a very large number of people. I can't mention all by name, but I'm very grateful to everybody, because the first edition came out in 1996, and of course this is a new edition. And in fact I did review the very first edition a very long time ago. Do read the preface at the beginning of the 5th edition, which I think is very helpful. It does set the tone very nicely, and that's actually dated November 2019. Then there's of course a preface to the first edition. Then you've got the contents section, and as I say, this is a big book. You see the contents section is very substantial all the way through. Then you've got the table of cases. Again, quite a large number of cases going all the way through. Then you've got the various pieces of legislation. You've got statutory instruments and the statutes. Then you've got European legislation and conventions, all of which will still be around for some considerable time, whatever happens with our relationship with the EU and other organisations. Then there's foreign legislation as well, because this is a subject at the very core of international problems, which is why there is no proper regulation in some senses. There is some regulation, but depending on what you interpret it to be, it gives you an overview at the beginning, chapter 1, of what the internet is and how it operates. Now you see there is a nice little index right at the beginning to the chapter, and you can see the paragraph numbering at the sides there, and it says the internet digging beneath the surface. And that's actually where we're going, and you can see the structure of the book to run through. There's a bit of footnoting at the bottom there, and it runs through all the way. Some of the footnoting is quite substantial, as you see in the middle of the book, and so forth. It's a very detailed book, a very large amount of information, and there are some commentators who basically take a line that there is no proper regulation at the moment. There is some form of regulation in some areas, but it's the difficulty we have is the longer term future of how we're going to deal with some of the problems that are thrown up by the internet, hence the internet and what lies beneath it. So what do we say? Well, the first edition of what's now a long established legal text on internet law came out in 1996. It was the dawn of the internet, as you probably all recall, or you might say at least the beginnings of its widespread use. Now, from what was once a slender volume, Internet Law and Regulation has now evolved into a brand new 5th edition, and it's quite a massive and authoritative text of what is about 1,700 odd pages when you take all of the bits and pieces into account. It's come to us, of course, from Sweet Maxwell, Thomson Reuters. And, of course, I would say that clearly the law and the way we did things in 1996, when, for instance, I was very much the old school as a barrister at law, because we did things so very differently from the way we conduct our business today. It wasn't email, it was all done in a paper form, walking around the clerk's offices, getting the briefs and all the other things. Everything has changed, and that is to do with the internet, with the way we do things and how we're going about things in the future. So it's directly relevant to everybody in the business community and in personal life, because the internet today is a relevant thing for everybody. If you think about what you're buying, what you're looking for, how you do things, you've got to go online and you've got to know how to do it. Lawyers, of course, find themselves involved in the often complex legal issues pertaining to the internet, particularly social media, which is the big area at the moment. We think, will find this book indispensable. Social media is a particular problem, and it's one that is going to come back over the years. There will be new editions of this work, and obviously it will be a question, not just for this government here in the United Kingdom, but for other people elsewhere, to start thinking about what they're going to do, because it has been totally insufficient thought put into this, and that means that people have been doing things that they shouldn't be allowed to do. But that's another story. It's a thorough book, this one, and it's erudite. It robustly tackles the said issues I've just raised with an engaging, plain-speaking approach, we think. It's highlighted in the introductory chapter with what is called, we think, an attention-grabbing commentary, drawing an intriguing analogy between the internet and the typical urban built environment and all the issues that has thrown up. So you can see the problems. We all now know what the internet is, says the author Graham Smith, but how many outside the technical community would claim to know how it works? Our day-to-day use of the net does not reveal what lies beneath the streets of cyberspace, he adds. We have erected not just a few online dwellings, but a sprawling conurbation. And writing a book on internet law has now come to resemble writing a book on the law. He also observes, explaining further, that much of the legal analysis contained in the first edition remains relevant today, because clearly the law itself is the issue. And of course, one area we have to deal with is compliance, recognising that where the law is infringed and all the other issues. And of course, as we say, what we had in the first edition, which is relevant now for this edition, is that it embellishes the points made by the courts and the legislators that the internet has evolved from relative obscurity to omnipresent methods of communication. And it's not going to change. There have been people who don't like it, lots of people don't like it, but that is where we are, and that is the journey we're travelling in at the moment. Obviously, internet law itself encompasses what I describe as a range of other topic areas of substantive law issues, if you like. That includes copyright, defamation, incorporation of contract terms, consumer protection, and more recently, the growth in communication offences, and that is actually on the rise at the moment. And you can add to this list such topics as electronic contracts and transactions, again things like the electronic signature, which is recognised now, payment mechanisms and competition law. See, payment mechanisms also encompass the possibility and the problems of hacking. Other areas under scrutiny include data protection. We've got the link, of course, with the GDPR from Europe, contracts and electronic transactions, payment mechanisms, offensive communications, and online safety. That includes, of course, the problems we do have, which are international in essence, pornography and sexual offences, including also gambling, the pharmaceutical industry, taxation, and a lot more. So it's a very wide area. You do your tax form on the internet now, and so forth. So you can see the changes that are taking place. And given the internet's ubiquity, accessibility, and global reach, we are in a global community, let's face it. The key issue in all of this is one of enforcement, as I've alluded to. So note the book's 5th chapter on content liability, enforcement and policing. There's also a key chapter on tax in all its relevant manifestations, including crypto assets, blockchain and artificial intelligence. And of course the point again about that is that there are really serious problems with things like the new concepts of certain types of currency, which are being used, of course, by the professional organised criminal, and that these are main global problems which will not be easily addressed. So bearing in mind that internet law and regulation has become a wide-ranging, far-reaching and frequently controversial subject, it's fortunate for practitioners that this highly regarded text from Graham is straightforward and easy to use, with numbered paragraphs throughout and an almost minutely detailed table of contents and index. I did find it helpful because there's a huge amount of information and you should be able to find what you're looking for pretty quickly. Researchers, I think, will appreciate the extensive table of cases at the front, and also, of course, we've got the standard statutes, statutory instruments, and of course the European legislation, which is still relevant and will be for a long time, and the international conventions and foreign legislation. Because as I said right at the beginning, this is global, it's not localised just to England and Wales jurisdiction, it's much, much bigger. Let me conclude. In the ongoing battle to impose obvious and necessary legal constraints on internet providers, including those who appear almost unassailable, there are rather a lot of them, this book emerges, I think, as a formidable weapon. And a word of cheer in this regard comes from the US Attorney General William Barr, who, as I'm recording this, has been in the news in the United Kingdom for a number of reasons. And he, according to comments in the financial press, recently questioned whether Facebook, Google and other major online platforms still need the immunity from legal liability that has prevented them from being sued over material posted by users. Quote, "No longer are tech companies the underdog upstarts," he said. "They have become titans." As I record this, Elizabeth wrote this, she saw the article, we talked about this, and I can say now that quite clearly at some stage this business of immunity has got to be overturned, because otherwise it's letting so many criminals off the hook and many people are actually suffering, which means that the basic fabric and content of the criminal law is undermined. And that is something, and that's international as well as national criminal jurisdictions. So you can see the issues. And as they are referred to by Barr and others as a titanic struggle which continues, lawyers as well as general readers will certainly perceive an urgent need to acquire this book. It was published around about November 2019, and I'm recording it in 2020, early part of 2020. We've got a new government in Britain, and obviously there will be, now that we've moved beyond the main bit of Brexit, there will be other legislation that we look at in the future. Now I'm opening the book in the middle. Now you can see there's the standard structure of the book right in the middle. You can see the paragraph numbering, you can see the footnoting, very helpful. This is actually on cross-border liability, territoriality, jurisdiction and applicable law. This is the fundamental, in my submission, to a certain extent, of the problem, because you've got things like harassment being dealt with. so people can do various things and think they can get away with it. There are a whole range of trademark passing off and passing off. There are a whole range of things that are being done by evil people who are getting away with it and think they're going to continue to get away with it. The answer to that, this book is extremely useful because it highlights where we're going, but the answer is with the politicians and the international community. Don't hold your breath, because it's going to take a long time. It's a long road. In the meantime, thank you very much to Graham Smith and all his colleagues, and of course to Sweet Maxwell and Thomson Reuters for producing what is a valuable work for all of us. Thank you. Bye-bye.